Hi there. Welcome to another edition of the Processing Blue podcast. I'm Panthers beat reporter Mike Kaye, as you can see, wearing blue. And then we are joined by fellow Panthers beat reporter and birthday boy, Alex Zietlow. Make sure you harass him. Yes, harass him with happy birthdays on his X timeline, on YouTube, in his email. You can find all that information on the web. It's not that hard to find, but make sure you just make his inbox just obnoxious, please, for the sake of the show and the sake of bits. But anyway, birthday boy, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Mike, did you just use the royal we? You said, and we are joined by Alex Zietlow.
I don't really know what the royal we means. I didn't get a UNC education. I went to another North Florida that unfortunately, if they were trying to recruit Bill Belichick, would have to recruit him to coach golf or basketball
can I shed my ignorance real quick? Where's North Florida located? Like what city?
in North Florida. It's located in Jacksonville, but
Jacksonville. Okay.
that is actually a fair question because Orlando isn't technically Central Florida. And I mean, I guess it is, but University of South Florida is not really Tampa's not really South Florida. South Florida is like Palm Beach down. I don't know. We're not teaching a geography class
Yeah,
here.
we're not about Florida geography. I just think the only northern Florida city or municipality I know of is Pensacola
But that would
because
be West Florida.
that would
That's
be west.
Northwest, yeah.
Ah, okay. I'm learning something. Yeah,
Right.
one of my best friends lives in Pensacola. I actually went to Pensacola last year to cover
Right.
the Snowball Derby, which, Mike, you know a lot about, right? Which is a
Of
stock
course.
car racing.
Oh, I thought you were talking. Never mind. I almost made a joke about a matchup this past weekend. I won't.
Oh, yeah, no, no,
Yeah.
not that.
Uh,
Anyway, Florida, nice place. Breaking
yeah.
news.
Um, yes. Look, we're jovial off the top, but we should talk about something relatively serious and unfortunate. Uh, the Eagles defeated the Panthers 22-16 in Philadelphia, but probably the biggest loss of them all was in the first quarter when Jonathon Brooks, the rookie running back, suffered a retorn ACL. He obviously missed the first 10 games of the season with 9 games of the season with a torn ACL. No, 10 first 10. Sorry, excuse
Yeah,
me.
he
My
missed
math's
Munich
off.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, as he recovered from a torn ACL that he suffered at the University of Texas, he was still the 46th overall pick. He was the first running back off the board. I know there's going to be a lot of people questioning that pick. I mean, there were even when it was made to draft a running back, a position not all that valued by the league, especially coming off a major knee surgery. And now there's more ammunition to argue against that pick, which when you consider that the Panthers traded back from 39 into the 50s and got a second round pick that they badly needed for 2025, and then also got Jonathon Brooks, it was much more palatable. Now it just seems like an odds on mistake. And so, I mean, where are you at with this Jonathon Brooks outlook? Because this injury came roughly 13 months after he suffered the first one. And we all know how long it took for him to get back. He said that he was going to be ready in camp. That's when the pick looked okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Didn't happen until late November. So, yeah, Alex, what's your take on all this?
The first emotion I feel is just devastation. Like not to be too saccharine about this sort of thing, but Jonathan Brooks was this guy who who in front of cameras, in front of voice recorders was really good. He was really nice. Um, I did a story on him and his family. I talked to his mom and his brother um, from, a small town in Texas, Hallettsville, and I wrote about how his family will feel ahead of his NFL debut. I wrote about how his small town would feel ahead of his NFL debut, and I also like and also what his dad, who passed away while Jonathon was at Texas, how he might be feeling and how he's kind of, watching over him above and all these things because they're a family that believes in God. And so, like, when you kind of tell someone's story and you get close to them, that's devastation's the first thing. I remember watching the play, I was like, "Okay, so Bryce hands the ball off, it looked like it was gonna be, like, an inside run kinda right behind one of the guards, and he kinda bounces outside, and I'm like, "Ooh, we haven't seen this from Jonathan before," and then he just, like, slows down, and he just slowly crumples to the ground, and if you've seen football enough, you know that non-contact injuries are never good. And then if you can't see an ankle pop or if you can't see, like, a hip move or something, it's oftentimes the knee, and he couldn't even make it off the field. The imagery there, I mean, you were actually on the field, so I wanna hear what you saw and what you felt there, but from the broadcast, like, you saw Chuba Hubbard kneeling beside him, basically praying next to him. Uh, you saw the sideline trying to figure out what's going on. Dude, it was just, I mean, the first thing that I think of is just like, "Man, dude, it had to happen to him." I mean, it's terrible to happen to anyone, but golly, man, that's so tough. We asked Dave Canales about this extensively yesterday, and he said that Jonathan has been through this before. He knows how difficult the path is, but he also knows the road to recovery better than anyone in the building. Um, so that is a quote advantage for Jonathon Brooks. It's not truly an advantage, but he at least knows he knows what the future looks like for him. Is 2025 a possibility? I don't know at this point. I don't know. It's just I am not in the mode yet of just like analyzing how this will impact the team this coming season or next year. I'm just still in the devastated phase. Mike, what was it like on the field though? I'm sure it was kind of a somber, strange feeling.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough, and I think Jonathan Brooks is, as you said, personality-wise, a very easy guy to root for. He's obviously dealt with a lot of adversity on and off the field, early in his adulthood, and, the Panthers invested a lot in him. I mean, look, if you watch his tape from college, he was dynamic. I mean, he was getting compared to Jamal Charles. Like, that's a pretty big compliment, and I think he's still capable of doing stuff. I think the upside is probably going to be tampered with. I mean, then again, we've seen guys recover from ACL injuries and go for 1,000 yards pretty regularly in this, you know, modern NFL. The ACL isn't what it used to be, as far as like a devastating injury, but back to back is really tough. And I think a guy, ironically, he did this in Philadelphia, but a guy that I look at who really was able to overcome a lot of knee injuries. I know everybody's going to make the Thomas Davis comparison here because you go with what you know, but Carell Buckhalter was a guy who was a really good change of pace, kind of, dual threat running back, similar to Jonathan Brooks. He suffered two major injuries, missed 3 full seasons during his career due to injury, but was able to kind of recapture his talent and eventually got a pretty big contract from Denver. He was kind of the perennial backup to Brian Westbrook. He's a guy who really salvaged his career. He was never a 1,000-yard rusher, but he was a very productive NFL back, made a lot of money. Um, but I think obviously, Jonathan just turned 21 in like July. He's got a lot ahead of him as far as life and his career. And I think, their training staff is the right training staff when it comes to patience and putting things together. But it is kind of a rough outlook. I mean, in a cylinder, I didn't love the Jonathan Brooks pick. I understood it. When you're as bad as the Panthers were last year, you just need talent upgrades. Like I thought they should have gone after Edgerrin Cooper, but they traded back, and he obviously came off the board, and then they traded up and did their thing, and then ended up with Trevin Wallace. Um, I think they just wanted dynamic play from anywhere, and obviously Chuba Hubbard was going into a contract year. Miles Sanders had been a bust signing, so they felt like they needed to safeguard the future running back. And look, Dave Canales constantly said that he wanted to be severed with the running game, and he has lived up to that for the most part. And so I think there was logic in drafting him. It's just, this is the way the ball bounces. Uh, it is a risk to draft players with extensive injury histories. It's probably why they weren't interested in Peyton Wilson, who was playing very well. So, excuse me. But moving on, speaking of the Eagles Panthers game, Adam Thielen's hands belong in a museum. Unfortunately, Xavier Legette hands have been made out of stone this
Oh,
season.
wow.
Um, Look, Sunday was a really bad look for the draft class, and this was a draft class that had garnered a lot of praise during the first 12 weeks of the season. I still think it's a very good draft class. I don't think it's a great draft class. I think some people are getting kind of carried away with it. I think it's a very good draft class. There's a lot of potential there. Uh, let's get into it. So this was a closer game than either. I mean, you predicted that it would be a close game, which I find utterly ridiculous because on paper this should have been a blowout. And frankly, the Eagles kept the Panthers in the game by not running the football, which I thought, and I said on this podcast, if Nick Sirianni doesn't run the ball with Saquon Barkley 20 times, he's doing it wrong. And look, they're having some drama with their passing game, and they wanted to get the passing game going. They also have a former quarterback as their offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore, who loves to throw the football. But frankly, I just don't understand why you don't just run the football with Saquon Barkley. I mean, he's the best runner in the league. He finished with 124 yards. But they ran the ball with running backs 9 times in the first half, 14 times in the second half. Yes, I mean, Saquon Barkley hit his average, but he could have easily run for 200 yards in this game. This team is abysmal against the run. But what I was really impressed by was the passing defense. They held the Eagles to 83 net passing yards because they had 4 sacks. So if you count the lost yardage there, Jalen Hurts had 108 yards and 2 touchdowns. Didn't turn the ball over though. I called that Greg Calcaterra touchdown pretty early in the week. I just thought he was a terrible matchup for the Eagles. Um, but I mean, look, everybody made miscues, right? Like, Bryce Young with that overthrow that was intercepted by CJ Gardner-Johnson ultimately leads to a touchdown drive before the half for the Eagles. The Eagles had a missed 52-yard field goal. I don't know what's up with Jake Elliott, but he's one of the most accurate distance kickers in the entire league. Obviously, kickers are going through it this year. Shaw Smith-Wade has the offsides that gives basically an extra point to the Eagles, or it really gives them 2 extra points because Elliott missed the extra point. Then, I thought Bryce played exceptionally well outside of that interception. Dave Canales called a really balanced game. I was really impressed by his handling. I thought Everode deserved credit for the pass defense. What did you take away from this game as I ramble?
Well, since you brought up Bryce, I'll talk about Bryce Young for a second. And I found another interesting split stat that I wanted to run through you with. So here's Bryce Young's stats in the fourth quarter within 7 points. And that has more often than not this season meant that the Panthers are down within 7 points in the fourth quarter. Okay, he's 21 of 41, so only a 51.2 completion percentage. But he has thrown for 207 yards for 1 touchdown and 1 interception. And here's the thing that I think is most interesting. He's only been sacked once in those 41 dropbacks in the fourth quarter within 7 points. What that tells me is that he's being more decisive in any other part of the game, or he's not being as decisive in any other part of the game besides that situation. Which if you're gonna want a quarterback to be decisive at any point, it's gonna be at the end of the game. It's gonna be, 3rd and 7 in your own end zone, where you have to make a great play, and he did several times against the Eagles. I think a lot of Bryce Young's great play against the Eagles this past week has been shaded by his final drive, which is cool, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Going into that final drive, though, he only had 128 yards passing. 60 he finished 19 of 34 for 191 yards, but 63 of those yards happened on that final drive. And arguably, he should have gotten an extra chunk and an extra touchdown if Xavier would have caught that final ball. So, that's cool that, like, Bryce's stats show up as well as it did. It's great that the vibes are so high on Bryce. A lot of it has come at the end of these games. And guess what? That's when playmakers are made. That's when champions are made. Like like
Right.
when Steph Curry hits a shot and he does this, like, that's what people remember. People remember him like in the gold medal game or in the semifinal game. They don't necessarily remember him
Sure.
like breaking records in the NBA regular season. It's fine. But like that is some important context to consider. Like, he has been
Sure.
exceptional at the end of games, and that does kind of make the rest of his, like, his, kind of more lukewarm game, even if it's mistake-free, that does kinda, like, inject some juice into the rest of his game, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. Yeah.
Does that
Uh,
does that like, just based on what you're seeing, does that kind of ring true, particularly this past week?
yeah. I mean, I think there's something to be said that he has 7 touchdowns and 7 interceptions on the season, and he's played, I guess 8 games, or he started 8 games. I think, you know, there's this there's this inclination nationally to be like, "Oh my god, the Panthers are fun," and blah blah blah. I mean, it's very weird. Um, I think right, but I think there's like this national perspective of like, "See, we weren't completely wrong," and I find that kind of a little off-putting. Like, look, I also said that I thought that he was worth the first overall pick, but like, I don't know that he's been worth DJ Moore 2 first-round picks, and all the rest. I do think he's improving. I do think he has significant upside. If he continues to play the way he has, I think he can be a starting quarterback in this league. Will he ever be worth what they traded for him? That remains to be seen. I don't think so. But then again, it's not like Chicago's really doing anything with what they got in return. I mean, yeah, they've got a lot of pretty headlines, and I think they have one more win. But they also just fired their coach midseason. I think that the evaluation of Bryce Young needs to be nuanced. Like you said, I think early on in games, not that he's going through the motions, but he's putting up relatively average stats. It's hard not to look at what Sam Darnold's doing in Minnesota when everybody kind of hung him out to dry. And now he's almost got 30 touchdowns on the season. There's a month left to play. Like Baker Mayfield in the same boat, right? Um, but what I would say is I do think Bryce is excelling in spots where he clearly did not excel in before the benching. I did find it very interesting as some of these national reporters claim that Bryce was always going to be back in the lineup. That Dave Canales on record yesterday. So this is during Bryce's hot streak. Basically, yesterday, well, Monday. Well, I mean, yeah, we're recording this on Tuesday. Wednesday is Alex's birthday, so just so you know. Uh, he basically was like, "Yeah, I don't know if when he would have gotten a shot." Like, I mean, that's telling to me, and it doesn't sell me on the fact that he is completely bought in. Um, Nor should he be, frankly. I mean, I do think a lot of people are like very much glamming up what Bryce is doing, and I think he deserves a lot of credit. I think he has grown exponentially. But when the floor was so low, it's very easy to feel like, oh, wow, the wheels are starting to turn. He needs to do this over a progressively long period of time. I think we'll talk about this later, but like the way they finish, they constantly talk about finish. He's got to finish this last month very, very high on a very high note to feel like, yeah, he is the unencumbered number one quarterback. And I think franchise quarterback is going to be thrown around there. we'll get there, right? Like, we'll see how that goes. But I think, yes, Bryce is improving. That was not an easy defense to go against. Frankly, Vic Fangio's defense has been dominant over the last 10 games. I think this was an otherwise impressive performance by Dave Canales and Bryce Young. I was impressed by Dave Canales' complimentary play calling. I thought a lot of his situational stuff was good. He did have some blunders. There was a sequence where they ended up scoring a touchdown with Chuba Hubbard, but basically gave up 2 timeouts to get there, and it was the middle of the third quarter. There were still like 17 or so minutes left to play in the game. They had some issues pre-snap where they were going to get called for a delay of game, and instead they took the timeout. Then Chuba Hubbard ran to the like half-yard line. Dave Canales thought that he got in from one angle, so they challenged it. The call stood, and then one play later they just ran a touchdown. So basically, they got a touchdown in return for an extra play of wear and tear and a timeout. So in a 6-point game, that's tough. But yeah, I mean, I came away from this game feeling like they can do some damage over the next 4 weeks. I still have said I think there's no way that they finish with less than 5 wins. I still feel that way. It wouldn't shock me if they got 6. I'm not impressed by Dallas at all. I think Atlanta is sputtering. I think Tampa Bay, while good, isn't completely, that much better than the Panthers. I think the NFC South is a garbage fire. And the Cardinals are kind of sinking as well. So I think they're going to have an opportunity to make some noise towards the end and get people feeling good about the future. Having said that, let's talk about Xavier Legette a little bit because we brought him up and, gee golly. So he's got a...
Wait, hold on, Mike. So we're not being moral victory Mike today?
I mean, I think there's a moral victory in what a lot of people did. I think Chuba Hubbard bouncing back from just a terrible look of a fumble and overtime that basically cost them the game last week. He comes back, rushes for 92 yards, surpasses 1,000 yards for the season for the first time in his career. Sets another new career high for 8 touchdowns in a game in a season. I think the defense had some really strong moments. They are sacking the quarterback at a very high rate as of now. And look, I think there's a lot to be said about where this team is going. I think the biggest topic of discussion right now is Xavier Legette dropping the ball pretty regularly. He's got a 15.2% drop rate. And folks are kind of jumping off the Legette bandwagon. I actually think he's played pretty much at the same level all season. I haven't been outwardly been like, oh my gosh, this guy's great, or wow, this guy is a number 1 wide receiver. They drafted him to play the X position. He's playing the X position now. It's been kind of a touch and go process for him since he's moved over there. They've been without Jalen Coker. So it's been mostly the Adam Thielen show in the slot. David Moore's kind of provided some help, but Legette has dropped some passes in some pretty important times. And I just kind of wanted to go over this. Like, I know people are kind of like losing it over his drops, but while he had really dependable hands his final year at South Carolina, there's no doubt that he's more of a body catcher. And I said this earlier in the season after the Cincinnati game, he makes every play look so much harder than it needs to be, right? It's not like Devontae Adams where everything looks effortless, right? It's not like Amon Ross St. Brown where he just catches the ball and runs. I feel like if he stayed upward, that's a walk-in touchdown for Bryce Young. He runs like he has pebbles in his shoes and fire in his heart. It's still true. I think he needs to learn the nuances of the position. I hope he kind of goes about it that way because he's still pretty raw, but he's also older. So you've kind of got to weigh both of those. I didn't love the pick. I liked the pick. I get it. I get the logic. But anyway, guys who are actually bigger typically are the ones that struggle. In 2015, Amari Cooper was the 4th overall pick. We said that Xavier Legette has a 15.2% drop rate as of now. I think it's naturally higher, but I'm a tougher grader. So anyway, Amari Cooper, 4th overall pick by the Raiders, had a 20% drop rate his rookie season. In
What?
2018, in 2018, Cortland Sutton had a 17.6% drop rate as the 40th overall pick. So kind of closer to where Legette is, big body target. What's interesting about both those guys is after their rookie seasons, they put up crazy numbers. Um, you know, eh, Amari Cooper still put up 1,070 yards as a rookie on 72 catches. The next year, he put up 1,153 and 5 touchdowns. Like, you get over to the drop rate. Cortland Sutton, his rookie year, while he had that drop rate, had 42 catches for 704 yards and 4 touchdowns. The next year, he made the Pro Bowl after catching 72 passes for 1,112 yards and 6 touchdowns. Jerry Jeudy, his rookie season, everybody was clamoring for the Panthers to trade for him this offseason. He had an 18.8% drop rate. He has since become a pretty good number 2 wide receiver in the league, bouncing around from like 856 yards as a rookie to 467 as in his second year to 972 and 6 touchdowns in 2022 and so on. And now he's about to eclipse 1,000 yards for the first time in the season after getting traded to getting traded away from Denver to Cleveland. So the point here is guys
That's
can
all. That's
bounce
all
back.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, guys can bounce back. The guys you've heard of, the guys you know from fantasy football or from college football, they tend to, ebb and flow in this league, even if they're good players. And I think Legette has a lot of upside. I think realistically, he's probably a big bodied number 2 wide receiver. You probably want to look into getting a number 1. I don't know if that's in the draft. They haven't really been particularly successful there. I also don't think T. Higgins is really the answer. I also think they're going to be outbid for him. So it might be a multi-year process. So I think there's no clear answer. Obviously, Adam Thielen is balling, but I just figured I'd give you a little bit of perspective there. There are veterans that also struggle with drop rates. Like Sterling Shepard in 2023 had a 23.1% drop percentage. Jameson Williams, who is making plays everywhere, 14.1. Darnell Mooney, 13.9% last year. Another guy, if you really want to look at a young player who struggled with drops and is now a top 1 or 2 wide receiver for his team that's a playoff team, is Rashad Bateman. In 2022, he was a second-year player, and he had a 25% drop rate. Darius Slayton has had a bad drop rate basically his entire career, and he's been the Giants' most consistent wide receiver. Deebo Samuel in 2021 had a 12.1% drop rate. Alshon Jeffrey, a guy who I compared, Legette to quite a bit in the draft, in 2020 had a 25% drop rate, and he was a veteran player. Like, guys go through it, especially big guys with big hands. It tends to be inconsistent. And so I think that that's kind of interesting. But with all that said, let's get into the Cowboys a little bit. The return of Jonathan Mingo. He has 2 catches for 10 yards since joining the Cowboys, by the way.
Hey, but Mike, I do want to just say that was like I learned something right there. Like that was some really good analysis on the whole Xavier thing.
Why, thank you. I did it just for your birthday. That's my present to you. You're not getting a mug after all. Anyway, I've been saying, look, you can hold me to this. I hope people make fun of me if they lose, but I've said since Munich, I think the Panthers are going to not only beat the Cowboys, I think they're going to beat them in a way that's pretty convincing. CeeDee Lamb on offense is terrific. Rico Dowd had a great game against Cincinnati on Monday night. I don't think he's as good as his numbers showed. That Bengals defense is awful. Oh, wait. Yeah, the Panthers are giving up more rushing yards than anyone. So, I mean, like, that's something they got to fix. But I think from a passing game perspective, I think they can do some stuff against Cooper Rush. They can get to him. They can sack him. I think they need to keep him under 20 points, just like, or 20 or 20 or less, similar to what the Bengals did on Monday night. But I think offensively, I think this team can do really well. I think this is a Chuba Hubbard game. I think you ride him. I got to also say the resolve of Dave Canales when he lost 2 running backs in the first quarter to continue to churn Chuba is incredibly impressive as a coach because you're risking your top back. He can't really get a breather. You don't have any other options, and yet that's the best way to win. I found that extremely impressive. I like the grit of that play calling. I like keeping it complimentary and not getting away from what works for you. So I got to give kudos to Dave Canales and Brad Izzik and pretty much everybody on the offensive staff there. The offensive line played pretty well as well. But I think the offensive line can do relatively well here. I suggested this on Twitter on Monday night that I think they should play a lot of 12 personnel with Brady Christensen instead of another tight end actually being in that second tight end position. I think you kind of on the broadcast they said that Micah Parsons is really lining up against the right tackle. So what you can do is you can put Christensen as that extra guy on the outside. Apparently, Parsons really likes being on that side. That's his favorable side. So if you put Christensen out there, you either force Parsons to go up against a double team or you force him to move toward the side that he doesn't really feel comfortable with. And then you run to the opposite side with that double team. I think that's a pretty good strategy. I'm no head coach, even though Robert Hunt the other day said, you should probably be a head coach.
Did he say head coach or did he say coach?
He said coach, but it was implied head coach. As Scott now calls me head coach Mike Kaye. But you hear that, UNC? You've got a fallback plan.
Yo, they're on their fallback plan, bro. But anyway.
But anyway. Well, at one point I thought I was going to get hired by the Charlotte 49ers, but there you go. Oh, well. Anyway, I'm sure I'll get an email about that one.
Yeah, let me run through some of these numbers real quick. So
you're the numbers guy.
You did a good job explaining Dallas's offense and how the Panthers can be successful against them. But here's some numbers on the Dallas defense that I think are compelling. They give up 28.2 points per game. That's 31st in the league, aka second worst in the league. They give up 365 yards per game, total yards. That's 25th in the league.
That's 1 yard for every day of the year.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yay.
You even got the quarter in there because it's technically 365 days in a quarter. That's why we have that leap day. Or that leap year. Yeah, dang, bro. You really hit that one.
Spitting bars over here. So.
Opposing red zone touchdown scoring percentage, 74.42. That's worst in the league. So all those Panthers fans who are like, we struggle in the red zone. Firstly, that was kind of that was put at ease a little bit in the Eagles game, but the Panthers should be able to score touchdowns from the red zone against these Cowboys because other teams have been doing that all year. The one strange outlier is that the Cowboys are a top 5 defense when it comes to opponent third down conversion rate. So somehow they are getting teams off the field on third down. But I know what Mike's going to say. If offenses don't get to third down, then that third down conversion is going to be low, which is what the Panthers did. Which is
correct. That is
that's like Mike K 102. Not quite 101, but that's some Mike K 102 stuff. And then Dallas on the offensive side of the ball, they're in the they're in the bottom half through pretty much all major categories, and they are really bad in red zone scoring percentage, red zone scoring touchdown percentage, at 31st in the league with only a 44% rate of converting that, and then they're not great on third down, and they are quite bad on fourth down. So everything that you just said about about this being a winnable game for the Panthers, it really, the Panthers should win this game, which is quite interesting because before the season I would not have said that because the Cowboys are quite talented, but it's just not working for them this year, man.
And look, the Panthers are terrible against the run. I mean, they're giving up 170 rushing yards per game, but the Cowboys are giving up 141.9 rushing yards per game. Like, Chuba Hubbard's going to eat in this one, kids. They just have to really watch out for turnovers because the Cowboys are very opportunistic. It's a very opportunistic defense. Micah Parsons can force mistakes. Bryce Young's got to protect the ball. Obviously, just threw his first interception in 4 games. That's impressive. They're going to have to ride Chuba. Bryce is going to have to continue to make strides in the red zone. I would not trade field goals for touchdowns because CeeDee Lamb is still CeeDee Lamb. He's a top 5 wide receiver in the league. And, you've got to run your bread and butter. You've got to do well in the passing game, in passing defense, and you've got to do really well with your run offense. Those are what you have to lean on. And okay, I wanted to do this before we go. Over under 2 catches in this game for Jonathan Mingo.
Under.
Over under 1 interception for the Panthers defense.
Ooh. Are we gonna do 0.5? Because what if I think they're gonna get 1 interception exactly?
You could just say push.
Okay, push.
All right. Here's what I'm gonna say. I think Bryce Young's gonna have a very good day. I don't think it's gonna show up in the yardage, but I do think it's gonna show up in his touchdown category. I think this is a game where Xavier Legette is going to be fed the ball a lot, but mostly to his strength in short yardage and possession opportunities. I don't think he is a guy who right now you can trust as a field stretcher. As much as he can get open, if he can't make the catches, that doesn't really matter. I think they're going to have to rely on Adam Thielen, who apparently is the only guy that Cooper DeJean can't cover in the league. I think, again, you got to ride the Canadian running game. That's what you got to do. You got to go north of the border against this Dallas team. Also, give us your over-under predictions to those Mingo and interception numbers. We're going to start doing this a little bit more in the comments. Give us a review. Do what you got to do. That rhymed. I didn't really know what to say after that. Do what you got to do. But also, what I would say is this is a great week to watch the American film classic Tombstone. It involves cowboys. It involves a bad guy named Johnny Ringo. Zach has clearly never seen the movie. It's the most quotable movie of the 90s, and you'll understand why Val Kilmer is one of my favorite actors from this film. It is...
Mike, I wanted to give you an over-under thing real quick.
Oh, okay. Over-under. How many times will Mike watch Tombstone this week? What do you got?
Over-under. Mike Boone carries 4.5.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to say over. Because I think he'll get 5 carries.
Okay.
5 carries. 5 carries. 5 carries.
And we're not talking touches. We're talking carries.
19 yards.
Well, wonderful. And if you don't know who Mike Boone is, you can head over to charlotteobserver.com where Mike Kaye wrote a good story on him but largely about the Panthers' depleted backfield, which is what we started the show with. Mike, good stuff. Let's send this all out. Thanks as always for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all your Panthers needs. Stay humble, stay creative, and Mike, keep processing.
That's a happy birthday rap, Zach.